So, today, on request of my friend Alexis, we're going to talk a little bit about your cookware. This is what I have, and I could ostensibly do with more or less, or change around what I have, or get different quality of whatever it is that I have. But at the moment, this is what I have, and I want to show you that with some of this basic stuff in your hands, you can do pretty much most of the cooking that you need to do. You can get a little bit more elaborate if you pair that along with baking dishes and do stuff in the oven so that you're not necessarily depending on just the four burners or two burners on your stove to get all the work done. So I'm going to show you what I end up reaching for almost every time I go to cook. Um, Caveat is that I live alone, so a lot of the stuff that I have is a skosh smaller than what would happen if I was living, say, for example, in the house that I grew up in, where on the regular, for the 4 to 6 people that were home every night for dinner, there would need to be enough food. So our pots and pans and dishes and cookware, mixing bowls, that kind of thing, they tended to be on the larger side versus what I have now, which is significantly smaller because I don't need as much quantity or size. I also know that for my brothers and my sister and my cousins, most of them are married and they have children. And again, we're talking they're going to need significantly more than what I have on hand. There's also the question of preference. Although you may not necessarily reach for a certain pot or pan every single day, you may have a preference for a certain pot or pan when you're doing a specific task. So I have certain people in my life that I know where they own specific pressure cookers that they use only to make dal for one particular application, shall we say. So they're not gonna be throwing whole huge amounts that are gonna cook for the family, and that doesn't make any sense. They're gonna be using that smaller pressure cooker to make like about a cup or so of dal at a time and cook it up and use it in something else, or just have it as plain dal to be used in something else some other time. There's also like I have a certain pot that I use pretty much all the time when I'm making like ramen noodles or some small amounts of something like a snack for myself. I'll generally break out the bigger pots and pans when I'm cooking something because I want to have enough space to move things around, but I don't want it to be so big that it's unwieldy to clean in my sink, because I'll also show you my sink. I'll also show you my cabinetry so that you understand that I don't have unlimited space. I do have a lot of space, but I don't have unlimited space. And the reason that I have even the space that I have is because I don't have too terribly much unnecessary stuff that I don't use on the regular. And every now and again, I'll go through and give away or get rid of stuff that is either broken or it's not functioning anymore or I never use it. In fact, I'm due for a purge in the next 2 3 months or so before the spring hits. I do like to go through and just cull some of the stuff that I haven't touched in a while, and you'll see some of what that is too. I needed it at one point in my life when I had different circumstances. I don't need it anymore because I have other stuff that'll do the same thing, but by and large, what I have now is a fairly streamlined stack of pots and pans. I'm going to show you the initial stuff that you need to get the minimum, like not the minimum, but your basics done. These are the ones that I reach for every day. These are the ones that every time I go to cook, I'm gonna pick up one of these. And these are what I would consider for a family of 1 to 2 people, more than enough to get the job done. It's more than enough even if you have company coming over, because you're not necessarily cooking on all four burners at the same time. So you this should give you enough pots and pans to get the job done, park it somewhere else, and then reuse that same pot or pan for another application, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So join me again in a second, and we're going to look at what I have as the basic setup. Okay, so we're back at my giant workspace again, and we're gonna go through the basic pots that I use for, day-to-day basis. This one right here is that ramen pot that I was telling you about, where I use this one for essentially making ramen. It is about 1.5 quart. Let's see if we can focus that. Come on, guys. There we go. 1.5 quarts, or 1.4 liters. The brand name is Calphalon Classic, and it's a fairly solid pan. I've had this particular pot since about 2005, and it has served me well. And for most applications where I'm not making a ton of food, this is more than enough. It's enough to make like a small amount of red lentils. It's enough to make like 1 can of beans and some spices before I throw it onto some rice. This is pretty much I need something right now, and I don't really feel like doing it on the microwave because I'm adding some whole spices and I want to get that dark aroma, so I'm gonna fry them in oil. So this is what I use this for. This one is the second most frequent pot that I reach for. This one is, let's see if it doesn't even tell us how big it is, but I would say that this one is roughly double the size of this one. And it's nonstick as well, just like this one is, and it's a really good little pot. It works for pretty much the other half of what I am doing if I'm just making one meal for myself. If I'm making something a little bit more elaborate, I'm going to want something slightly bigger, but for most tasks, this one I end up reaching for. I want to say that this is about 4 quarts. So we have a 1.5 quart and we have a 4 quart. This one I will use to make pasta sauces if I'm making pasta in one of the bigger pots. I will use it to make little side dishes while I'm making my main dish over here. It's a very handy little pot to have around. And like I said, because I'm one person, I end up reaching for this one quite frequently. And because the nonstick is so good in there, I trust it to pretty much take anything, and it's probably not going to give me too much fuss. So these are the 2 most frequent ones that I use, and if I didn't have any other pots in my apartment, I could ostensibly cook for myself about 3/4 of the time. What happens is that sometimes these aren't big enough for what I'm really trying to do. This is good for some small amount of cooking and frying vegetables and that kind of thing, but it's not quite big enough to evaporate off the heat. Say for example, if you have like mushrooms or onions or other aromatics where you want a large surface area so that the water evaporating goes away quickly. This one is a little too small for that, and that is when I go to the 3rd most common pot that I've reached for, which is this one. This one is it just says that it's 28 centimeters. It doesn't tell me the size either. But you have seen this pot before because I've used it in a couple of the soup videos. I've used it in a couple of other videos. I use this pot for everything that the other 2 cannot fulfill. It is large, it's deep enough, so I can cook a pound of pasta in here, no problem. I can then drain off the water and then cook it off with the pasta water and the sauce or whatever so that it all comes together. Same pot, no problem. It has a large surface area so that most of the water evaporates when I'm doing aromatics or other such things. So sometimes what I'll do is that I'll cook the pasta in here, take it out, park it in the colander, and not shake it. I'll just let it drain on its own, then quickly saute off some garlic and some herbs or whatever in here, and then saute the pasta with some of the pasta water and bring it all together in this pot. And it's extremely handy to have this one. If I had 3 pots and only 3 pots, and it was this one and the other 2 smaller ones, I could 100% do all of my cooking with just those 3 pots, and I would be perfectly happy. However, there are some more elaborate dishes that I sometimes need more space for than even this one can provide, and that's when my large stock pot comes into play. This is my large stock pot. I believe this one is 7.5 quarts. It's the same Calphalon brand as my little mini guy. It's 7.5 liters or 8 quarts. So that's fairly big. It's got a lot of space. It is non-stick, which means that when I put whatever in there, it's not going to cause me any fuss. This one I reach for when I'm making large batches of soup, or if I'm making anything that's going to overboil or make a huge mess on me. So I make my own soy yogurt at home, and I'll do about 1.5 liters or so at a time, which barely comes up to like down here. But my issue with soy milk is that when you're boiling it, it tends to overboil. So this pot is plenty big enough that it's not gonna overboil over the top and make a mess all over my stove. So this one I reach for when I have large batch cooking or anything that's super foamy or makes a mess on my stove, and I want to give it enough space to have headspace in the pot. This is a very large pot, and for me, this is about as large as I need it to get. Much bigger than that is overkill, and I don't have space for it. So I'll show you what this one looks like inside my sink so that you see what I'm talking about. I have a two-chambered sink for some reason. I don't understand why they couldn't just make it into one, but you know, it is what it is. The top of the spout just barely clears the top of the pot, which means that when I'm washing it, you see I just hit it. When I'm washing this, I don't have a very easy time of maneuvering inside that pot with the water coming out of the spout as it is. So I don't tend to reach for this one too frequently, partially because I don't need that much stuff at once, but also because I can't wash it very conveniently, so I don't like to reach for it too often. So now you're going to see a little bit of how my pots and pans are arranged when I put this away. And you see, again, my cabinet is not tall enough to accommodate both the pot and the lid, so the lid lives on a shelf above the pot. And all my pots and pans that I reach for all the time go into here, and everybody has its space. This is right here my small pressure cooker. This is what I was talking about when I said that sometimes people have a preference for a specific pot to do a specific job. So this pressure cooker right here is a Hawkins 2-liter, which is roughly like a half liter bigger than this guy. So this is big enough to make myself dal for just me, and it's just the perfect size. The reason that you want to use a smaller pressure cooker is because it comes up to pressure a lot faster because there's less space inside for the steam to build up, and the only way that the pressure builds up is with steam. So if you use a large pressure cooker like this guy right here, this one is my regular pressure cooker. I believe this one's a six quart, if I'm not mistaken. Do we see anything? We're gonna call it 6 quarts because I think that's about the size that this one is, and on the inside it has like a steamer basket and like a little measuring cup to tell you, how much water is the minimum that you have to have in there for steaming and for regular cooking. And this is what I reach for when I have large quantities of beans or dal to make. I don't necessarily need something of this size for regular everyday cooking, but what I'll do sometimes is that I'll take a large batch of chickpeas or black beans or whatever other beans that I have, and I'll just make a batch of it, and I'll keep the rinsed and drained beans in my freezer, and I'll keep small amounts in the fridge to use for regular cooking during the week. And so this is what I have to make those batch beans when I need to make them. But this one is ready to go back into its little nook also. I do have a small frying pan. This one, how big are you? 20 centimeters, so about 8 inches. This one I used to use quite frequently because I had somebody who liked pancakes and other, sweets who was living with me. I don't have that situation anymore, so this one has fallen into disrepair because now most of the pancakes and things that I make are done in this one, because even though it's deep, I will show you. Let me pull out like the turner that I use. Even though this is a deep pan, it's still convenient for me to get my pancake turner inside there. So like this is fine to make pancakes, but it's also good to make dosa and are and other type of pancakey type situations. So I don't really need a regular skillet because this is more than enough for me. I'm telling you, this is a workhorse of a pan. And when I have to replace it, I'm going to be unhappy because I don't like replacing my things. So, oh yeah, and this is my utensils drawer. Like every drawer that I own, there's at least one pair of scissors. So, for example, right here, there's the hiding scissors. Because scissors always get lost and it always irritates me. So then this guy goes back into storage. Let me put him back in this cabinet. So this goes back into that cabinet. And you see how like it's just a perfect height where I can ostensibly put something on top of it if I absolutely needed to, but I don't like to because I reach for this so often that I want to have it readily available and convenient to me. Pressure cooker. You're going to go back onto the top shelf where you belong, along with the frying pan. But like I said, I very rarely reach for that frying pan, so it's fine. Those pots I haven't used in a long time since I moved here, so probably those are going to get given away in the next purge. They're basically regular stainless steel versions of my non-stick 2-quart and 4-quart pan. So I don't end up using them very often, so there's really no reason for me to keep them. I'm probably going to give them away at some point in the near future. Then these two come back with me. And again, I could put something on top of this, but I don't because I reach for it so frequently, so I want to have it readily convenient. Then this one comes back with me as well. And now my pots are back into the shelf. Everything is happy. Everyone is belonging where they belong. Like I said, these are probably, I'm going to give away sooner than later because I don't need them because I don't use them. I moved here in like the end of August and I don't think I've reached for them one time. So there's really no sense in my holding on to them for no reason. It's not getting any use here. So it's time to set them free. So probably I'm going to give those away pretty soon. Then my pressure cooker, before I put you back, I'm going to show you the other stuff that I have on that same shelf with the pressure cooker. So now this is my large pressure cooker. This is a Hawkins Futura. What are you, a 7-liter? Yeah. So that's why I figured this one's a 6-liter because this one's a 7-liter and this one's a monster of a pressure cooker. It's very, very large and it's a very good pressure cooker, but I haven't used it in a very long time, so I'm probably going to end up giving this away as well. I'm not 100% sure. I might waffle on it because this thing cost me so much. But if I'm not using it, what's the point in keeping it here and, not getting the love that it deserves? So we'll see. But this one I like to have on hand because sometimes what I like to do is I'll take, hold on, let me show you if I have it here. Oh, this is my storage cabinets for my dishes. So that's where I keep my plates, the ceramic plate that goes into the microwave, and then stainless steel plates for regular eating, and then another set of ceramic plates that goes in the microwave on top of that. Those are small little, dessert plates, side plates, whatever. Those are my stainless steel drinking glasses. Behind that is some tea mugs. Then I've got some regular coffee mugs. Those I like to reheat soup and things like that in the microwave with because they're easier to cover and it's microwave safe and the handle makes it convenient to pull out. So I really do like those mugs. They're huge. Then I have my my storage containers that are all right there. But this is what I use to do cooking in the big pressure cooker. But let's just finish this tour real quick. So that's my glass lunch containers, because the work microwave, I would prefer not to microwave plastic in there if I can help it. These are deli containers. These are called deli-tainers. They're 1 quart size, and they're useful for absolutely everything. They're fairly inexpensive. I usually buy them like a 24 pack at a time, and I use them for absolutely everything. They get used for dry storage, for fridge storage. They get used for all kinds of crazy things. These are more microwave safe bowls. Then the top is the glassware, which I keep on the top shelf because I don't reach for it very often. And then there's like coffee and tea and things like that. So that's my dishes. That's all my dishes. And there is all my cookware. So then what I'll do with this one is that, say for example, I want to do like a potato and a dal type of situation. I'll put the dal in the outside of the pressure cooker body, as it were, and then inside here I'll put a couple of potatoes and then a little bit of water, and then I'll shove the whole thing inside there. I'll cover the lid and then throw it on the stove to finish cooking, and then I sort of get a whole bunch of things done at the same time. So that's my big giant pressure cooker. Not really necessary. So what I'm saying is that I could realistically quite happily do all my cooking with those 2 smaller pots, the big stock pot, and the wide deep pot that you saw. Those would be perfectly fine. This pressure cooker is a huge bonus. That small pressure cooker is a huge bonus. Most people don't need 3 pressure cookers in their lives. I used to entertain a lot, so it was always very handy to have more than one, because sometimes I'm doing multiple things at the same time. So I'll throw some potatoes into here, I'll throw some dal into here, and then I'll have some rice going in my rice cooker, and that small tiny pressure cooker, I'll have some other vegetable that's really stubborn and takes forever to cook. So when I used to entertain a lot, it was useful to have multiples of utilitarian type of pots like pressure cookers. And when you're not necessarily using it as a pressure cooker, it doubles as a regular stock pot. So it's very handy to have around. It's just I haven't used it in forever due to COVID. So let's put this guy back where it belongs, so that so we don't leave a mess. We like things to be tidy, right? Fine. So these are my big pressure cookers. I do use them. I don't use them as often as I used to, but they are very, very handy to have around. This one is the Indian model, where after it builds up to full pressure, it'll do like a quick release, which they call the whistle. This one is a Italian model, and you don't want it to make that quick release, because that means something is wrong. So this one just does a steady slow hiss that you keep at a low temperature so that it doesn't make a mess all over your kitchen and explode. The nice thing about this one is that it does not have a gasket. So the top of this is metal that kind of folds up and locks into place to keep this pressure cooker under pressure. This one has a rubber gasket that it uses to keep everything together. So two different applications. I like having them both on hand. They are very handy to have on hand. Then, when I first moved into this apartment, I found this traditional aluminum wok at the local home goods store, where they sell Indian home goods. That's all they do. But it's really, really, really small. So I asked my boss's parents if they can pick me up one in India, and they got me this one, and it looks really shiny because I use it all the time, and because it's a really good quality wok. This thing weighs a few pounds. It's a little bit on the heavy side, and the beauty of it is that when I got it, it was like slick smooth inside, so that as soon as I put some oil in there and I started cooking with it, it behaved in a non-stick fashion. So I really like having this one around to make small amounts of dry roasted veg, because the amount of oil that I need to fry my spices is much less since the bottom is perfectly curved like that rather than flat. When you have a flat bottomed pot, what happens is that the oil has to spread all over there, and for a good tarka, and we've been over tarka a few times, when you add the mustard seeds, the cumin seeds, the curry leaves, you need depth. You need depth of oil so that the spices deep fry and so the curry leaves deep fry. This one, because the cross section of the wok when you were you to cut it in half, is not a flat surface, it's a rounded surface. So what happens is that you need less oil to do the deep frying for the spices. So that this is a very, very handy pot to have around. However, if you don't have the space for a wok and you still want to do a nice tarka, they sell what is called a tarka pan. So this is not as round as I wish it was. It's still got a little bit of a flat bottom. But it does a far superior job of letting me have some depth of the oil versus having a flat pan. So this is also a very handy little thing to have. They sell them on Amazon. They're probably going to cost you a fortune on Amazon, but they are very handy to have if this one's a little bit out of budget, because a good steel wok like this online is probably going to be about like $30-40 if you only have like $5 to $10 to spend. If you look for what's called a tarka pan, you'll find something like this, and they're very handy to have. However, if you don't even have that $5-10 and you're at like a home goods store or like a Target or something, these are individual omelet pans, individual egg pans. Like they're meant to cook one egg, and it's really, really handy because when you put the oil in here, yes, this is a flat surface, but you tilt and it gives you that same depth that you would. So when I used to have an electric stove, this is the pan that I used for my tarka pan, because this would not have gotten hot enough. Whereas now, because I have the gas, the flame goes up the sides and everything's fine. Whereas with this one's becoming obsolete, and I don't think anyone wants a several years old non-stick single egg maker, so I'm probably going to just throw this out. But like I said, this is bonus, this is bonus, this is bonus. This one I'm definitely going to give away because I don't use it ever anymore, because I have replaced it with a nicer one. So like realistically, all these pots that you see in front of you are realistically extraneous. I don't necessarily need them for cooking. What I do hope you've noticed, hold on, I'll be right back, and we're gonna talk. Okay, so we're back. So what I'm hoping that you've noticed is that none of my pots and pans are necessarily a set. It's more individual pots and pans that I've picked up along the way with my cooking. Even that Calphalon large stock pot and the small Calphalon 1.5 quart pot, that one, I bought them both separately when I realized that what I had was not sufficient for what I need, rather than trying to buy them in a full set. Because when you buy pots and pans in a set, what ends up happening is that you end up with pieces that you're never going to use, that you don't necessarily even need. All my pots and pans I have bought sort of piecemeal over the years based on what I need. Sometimes I'll find a particular pot or pan on sale somewhere and it's a really good price and I know I'll use it, and that's why I get it. So like that deep wide pan that I have, that was that situation where I found it on sale and I bought it. The 4 quart pan that I use all the time, that one's the same situation where I found it on a good sale, I just bought it, and it served me well all this time. So I'm very, very pleased with those purchases. But what I'm trying to say is like, if I had bought a set, what they would have done is that, first off, they would have given me diminishing quality on each of the pieces. So what I've bought, I know what I paid for it, and I got my money's worth out of it. If I were to buy a set, they're trying to keep the price within a budget, maybe not a reasonable budget, but a budget. And that means that necessarily they're not going to be able to have the same quality control for all the pots and pans like they would if you're buying single pots and pans. If you're spending, let's say, $50 on the Calphalon pots, which is what I spent because those are very expensive pots, you know what you're getting. You're well aware of what you're getting, and that's why it does cost what it costs. When that 8 quart stock pot first came, it also came with the pasta steaming colander insert, which I got rid of because first off, I don't cook pasta that way. If I'm cooking pasta, I'm gonna drain it with a regular colander. I don't need that insert thingy, because what ends up happening is that the bottom of the insert for that pasta thing and the bottom of the pot has like that much space, and that's all water that's not being used to tumble the pasta around in the water. I want as much space for the pasta to move around in the water as I can give it. I don't want the pasta just hanging out in a small little area, in that stupid little colander insert. Secondly, the colander insert was all stainless steel, and my stock pot is non-stick, so I didn't trust it to go in and out of that pot, so I just got rid of it. It wasn't worth it for me. But this is what I'm talking about. Sets is like, if you get a set, you're gonna have even more pieces in there that you don't necessarily need. I would rather buy one piece of a specific brand that I like, spend the money on it, and know that I'm gonna get good amount of use out of it. All the pots that I've owned since about 2015. It's been about 5 years now, and they've served me well. Like, none of them have scratches. None of them have started to flake off the nonstick. Like, I've treated them well. They've served me well. I don't have any reason to replace them. With the cooking sets, with the pot sets, what ends up happening is that you have all these pots that you never use. So then towards the end of its life, you start realizing, oh, well, this pot is really nice, so let me start using that one. And it's not necessarily to your liking. You're not using it because it's the best tool for the job. You're using it because it's the best one in your collection, and you feel bad, splitting the collection or throwing out the thing because it was part of a set, and it's no longer part of that set. Just don't You don't need to commit to a full set. Just get a couple of the pots and pans that you need, that you find yourself using all the time, and just strip it down to that. If you want to figure out which pots to get rid of and which ones to keep, what you want to do is sort of like keep a mental tally the next time you cook, in your kitchen, for the next, let's say, week or so, and notice which pot you reach for over and over and over again. Because I can guarantee you, if you're anything like me, you have certain pots that are perfect for your burner, that they're perfect for the tasks that you do all the time. Go ahead and keep a mental note and say, okay, well, these ones I'm using all the time, all the time, all the time. There's no way I'm getting rid of this. I might even get a backup of it. And then there's going to be those pots that sit in the back of your shelf that you never touch. That big 7 quart, it's been at least a year since I've used it, because I haven't had company, so there's been no reason for me to use it. And even when I did have company, I could get most of the work done in the smaller pots and pans, so I haven't even used it in over a year, because even with company, I'm not reaching for it all that often. So it helps to sort of take this mental inventory of what it is that you're keeping and why you're keeping it. I did spend a lot of money on that Hawkins Futura pressure cooker, and it's a very nice pressure cooker. It really does a good job. But if I'm not using it for whatever reason, so maybe the reason is that it's such a big, bulky, heavy thing, and it's such a pain in the behind to wash in my sink, that I don't end up using it, and so it sits relegated to dust, which is a shame. So either I need to sell it or I need to give it away, because if I'm not using it, someone should. It seems a shame for it to sit there and gather dust when nobody's touching it. Same thing goes for those 2 stainless steel pots that we saw in my cabinet. There's no reason for me to hold on to them, because I literally have not touched them in 2 years. Like, they've sat there because those 2 non-sticks have replaced them completely. Like, I use those 2 non-sticks so frequently that there's really no point in my keeping those stainless steel ones. At one time, I used to use one of those stainless steel ones on my induction burner, my single induction burner, but I have gas now. I have no desire to deal with induction. I hate induction. So if I can do all my stuff on gas, I have zero reason to keep a pot just because it's induction capable. On my old electric stove, I didn't physically have enough space on my stove to put all four burners into use. Now my gas stove is an adult gas stove and I have enough space on there to use it. So there's no reason for me to whip out that induction burner at all. Like I said, I live by myself. If I have company, I can figure out how to do what I need to do between the oven and the stove and get the job done. And sometimes part of becoming a good cook is really sitting down with yourself and asking yourself those tough questions, like why am I holding on to this? Am I holding on to this because it has sentimental value? Am I holding on to it because it's beautiful and I like the way it looks, but I never actually use it and it's not very practical to use because it's heavy or it's bulky or I don't have space to put it on my stove because when I put that one big giant pot on my stove, it takes up enough space that the other burners are inconvenient to use. Is it a pain to wash? Is it not dishwasher safe? Is it, so like you sit there and ask yourself these questions. Why am I not using this thing? Why am I not using this thing? And if it really does have all that sentimental value for you, get it out of the kitchen. Get it out of the spaces where you're actively doing work and you need to be efficient and you need to get to your stuff. Get it into like a nice display case and say like, hey, that was my mom's cast iron that she passed down to me, and I never use it, but it's really beautiful and it's something that I want to use to remember her by. So I'm not saying like you necessarily have to go my level and purge everything that you're not using, but it does make sense to take an inventory every now and again and realize, okay, I need storage space in my kitchen. It does not make sense for me to hold on to every single thing in my kitchen that is taking up space. And if it's taking up space and you're not using it, then figure out where else to put it so that either that thing gets the respect of something that's sentimental, like somebody gave it to you and you think it's special because of that, or it's beautiful, put it in a display case, show it off. Like if this is your great grandma's pot that you never use because you prefer nonstick on your stove because you don't tend to make as much of a mess with it, which is why I tend to use the nonstick, then display that sentimental pot somewhere and show it off. If you don't feel like you can display the thing, maybe it's not that sentimental to begin with. So anyway, one tangent into another. That's a discussion for another day. I hope this gave you some idea as to what you really do need to have on hand to get your kitchen together and get your cooking life together with regards to pots and pans. Same thing goes for knife sets. Really quick, we talked about knife sets in my previous video where I have 2 chef's knives, I have 1 smaller knife for my friends who are scared of big knives, and then I have like a bread knife, and then I have a serrated knife from I don't know where, which I essentially use as a box cutter. And if whichever friend of mine recognizes that knife from their kitchen and wants it back, for the love of God, come get your knife and I will happily give it to you back, and I'll make you dinner while you're here. If you have any questions, of course, please ask them below, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.